came out and players gathered round. And it appeared that he had died, that his heart had stopped. But amazingly, medics were able to use a defibrillator to bring his heart back working again. It was truly amazing. And stories like that are truly amazing, that people can have their hearts brought back to life, that resuscitation can happen. But this morning I'm going to be very honest with us all and tell you that one day Christian Eriksen, the footballer, his heart will stop for the final time. And so with all of us, unless Jesus comes again before that. Our life on earth will come to an end. But this morning we're going to see something even more amazing than someone being resuscitated. We're going to see a life that was dead for days, brought back to life by the resurrection and the life. You see, the amazing news for all of us this morning is that even though we will all die, we can't, if we believe in Jesus, we can have life that lasts forever. And that's amazing. So let's get into the story together. And we see, first of all, that Jesus hears about his sick friends. You see, a message is sent to Jesus by Lazarus' two sisters. And the message is this in verse 3. Lord, the one you love is ill. The message is sent. And Jesus hears the message. Verse 4, when he heard this, Jesus gets the message. But he doesn't reply. He doesn't send word back to Mary and Martha. It's like sending a text to someone and not receiving a reply back. And you wait and nothing happens. And it can feel frustrating at times. No, in fact, Jesus appears to do nothing particularly. Verse 6, when he heard Lazarus was ill, Lazarus who he loves, he stayed where he was 2 more days. He hears the message, his friend, someone he loves is ill. And this is Jesus who can heal the sick. And he just stays where he is. Imagine you get a phone call from a friend who's at the Royal Sussex County Hospital, just up the road, and they tell you they're very ill, and they'd like to see you. And you put the phone down and you decide not to visit them. You don't really appear very worried at all. You just stay where you are. That's what it feels like Jesus is doing here. It feels like he doesn't really care. Why is he not rushing off to Lazarus and healing him? Lazarus, the one he loved. And sometimes we will have prayed for people who are sick. And it feels like he's not listening. What's he doing? Is he really at work? Maybe too here at Park Hill, as these days at the moment feel uncertain and a little bit small. Maybe you wonder if Jesus is listening to your prayers for the church? What's he doing? Is he hearing? Is he going to do something? Let's be assured as we continue through this passage in what we see, Jesus is at work, but it isn't always as we expect. Verse 4. When he heard this, Jesus said, "This illness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Jesus is different from each one of us. We are human beings. We do not know the future. And though, yes, we are reading an account of Jesus' human life on earth, he's fully human, yes, but he's also fully God. And none of us are gods. And because of that, none of us really know what is going to happen in the future. We may have our plans for tomorrow, but we don't know if those plans will actually happen. We don't know what is really going to happen tomorrow, but God does, and he sees the future brightly and clearly in a way that we do not. And it's for his glory. He is working for his glory. Even as strange as it seems that he doesn't rush off to heal his friend Lazarus, who he loves. And it feels strange. Jesus said this illness will not end in death. And then we go down to verse 12 and we see Jesus is talking about Lazarus' death. Verse 11, sorry. After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe." But let us go to him. Jesus describes Lazarus' death as sleep. He has taken sleep and he has woken up somewhere else, not in this world. He is dead. His earthly life has drawn to a close, but Jesus says he's going to wake him up again. But his disciples don't get it. It seems very odd. Lazarus is dead. And when people die, we don't expect to see them again on this earth. All of us, I'm sure, will remember last September when the Queen died. The Queen who'd seemed to be around forever, and we probably kind of thought she would always be around forever. She died. Her life on this earth came to an end, and there were those few days, those extraordinary days where there was that long queue down the River Thames as people went and saw her coffin lying in state, as the nation together grieved the loss of the Queen. She had gone, she had died, people were sad. They won't see her again on this earth. And Lazarus, likewise, he has died, and we don't expect dead people to rise again. And in life we will, as I have said, we will pray for people who are sick. And sometimes those people won't get better, and sometimes they will die, and sometimes we will question that timing and say, "God, what is going on?" And here in this situation, it seems so strange Jesus says Lazarus is dead, but he said it would not end in death. And he even says, I'm glad I was not there for your sake, so that you may believe. It seems surprising. So Jesus arrives. We see next. Jesus arrives, but is he too late? Jesus arrives, but is he too late? Verse 17. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. He arrives after he had heard about Lazarus' illness a few days before, 4 days before. He's 4 days late. Lazarus is dead. And we don't expect dead people to rise again. Jesus is very late. When people are late to things, it can feel frustrating. If you expect something to turn up, something to start on time, and people are very late, it can feel frustrating, can't it? I'm in the process of organising a wedding for myself and my fiancée. Happening in July the 24th, and we're going to send out invitations to people. July the 24th, 1 p.m. But if people are 4 days late, 28th of July, 4 days late, they will miss everything. There will be no party going on, it will be an empty church, nothing happening, too late. And this is the situation here. Jesus has turned up 4 days late. If he'd been here a few days before, he'd be alive. There would be something to do. Martha, who is also friends with Jesus, Martha, one of Lazarus' sisters, hears that Jesus was coming. And so verse 21, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. You hear the frustration in her voice. If you had been here, he would not have died. Because you can heal sick people. You are God. You have shown it in the past, and you could have done it here. But you were late. But Martha does believe in Jesus. She believes that Jesus is God. I think we get that from the rest of the conversation. Verse 22, but I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. And then verse 23, Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. She has the confidence that Lazarus will rise again on that last day when this earth comes to an end, when the world is judged, when those who believe in the Lord Jesus will enter into the glorious new creation, where there will be no more death. Martha has that hope in the Lord Jesus. But now he's dead. He's buried in the tomb, been there for 4 days. That seems like it's it. Yes, it's good to know that Lazarus will rise again at the last day, but how does that help Martha now? How does that help us now? We feel the sadness and the loss of those who have gone before. But we can find comfort in what Jesus says to Martha next. Verse 25. Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die." Jesus offers great hope and assurance to Martha that he is the resurrection and the life. He's the resurrection. He can bring those who believe in him are brought to life that lasts forever. Not like resuscitation we thought about at the beginning, someone's heart coming back for a bit, but then in years to come will die. No, life that lasts forever. And that is true for all those who believe in the Lord Jesus. And Jesus also says that he is the life. All of us are born, and we do have life in this world and in our bodies, physical life. But when we're born, all of us are dead in our sin. That's what the Bible shows us. Yes, God knows we have physical life, but in terms of our relationship with him, we are dead. We have no life. We are sinful. And if we are left in that state, we face a future of eternal judgment. But the amazing news this morning is that Jesus is the life that he can bring those who are dead in sin to life forever with him. And Jesus stands with Martha and declares that, "I am the resurrection and the life." And that is great assurance to Martha. Yes, Jesus seems to be too late for Lazarus, who was ill, but he is so alive because he believed in him. And Jesus shows up and stands next to Martha and offers her the assurance that he is with her in her mourning, standing beside her, saying, "I am the resurrection and the life." People we know and love, they will get sick, and people we know and love will die, and we rightly feel the sadness of that loss. But we have the comfort that those who believe in Jesus, they have resurrection and life. And Jesus knows that. And he says to each one of us this morning, do you believe this? Well, we hear what Jesus says. We've heard him say he's the resurrection and the life. And you know what? I believe that KFC chicken is finger-licking good because they tell me it is on their adverts. But if I just hear that and don't go down London Road and see people for myself enjoying KFC chicken, and if I don't go and buy it for myself and taste for myself that it is, then I just believe something without much evidence. And you know what, this morning it is true that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. But the passage doesn't end there. The amazing thing is that we get to read on together and we get to see for ourselves that Jesus really is the resurrection and the life. That what he says is true by what he does. And it's very exciting, even more exciting than very tasty chicken. So, two things that we see here as Jesus responds to his friend Lazarus' death. The first is that Jesus weeps. Verse 35 says, Jesus wept. It's the shortest verse in the whole of the Bible. And yet maybe it's one of the most powerful verses, one of the most comforting verses for us to hear. You see, Jesus goes and he sees where Lazarus' body is laid in a tomb. His friend, the one he loves, has died, and tears come down his face. Tears come down the face of God. He has experienced the loss of a very close friend. He knows what it's like. Tears come down his face even as he knows he is the resurrection and the life. I don't know if anybody is grieving the loss of someone that we know and love. But know this morning, that Jesus does understand more than you will ever know. Because he has experienced the tears of losing someone too. And you know what? We can talk to him in prayer, knowing that we can be very honest with him about how we feel, about the sadness that we feel. Because he knows what grief is like. Even if we're not honest with anyone else, we can be with him. And that is a comfort. Not only does he weep, but he was also deeply moved. Verse 33, when Jesus saw her, that's Mary, weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. It says Jesus was deeply moved and troubled. The kind of words behind that are words which show us that Jesus is actually feeling anger, a real distress and anger about this situation of a death. He sees that it is not right. It was not part of the original good design of this world that God has made. And it's a very final thing for someone to die. It feels that. And Jesus feels that anger, that not rightness of death. But the wonderful news is that Jesus, the resurrection and the life, has not just stayed up in heaven and left us on our own in that situation. The wonderful news that we see in this passage and in the Bible is that he was willing to come down to human beings and not just stand alongside us and say, I am the resurrection and the life, but to do something about it. He has come to rescue us. And you know what's it's amazing that he feels this. It's amazing that he stands and weeps because Jesus knows what's going to happen next. We've seen that he will know. We saw that in verse 4. This illness will not end in death. And now we reach the kind of grand finale, the spectacular ending of this passage, where we see that Jesus does raise Lazarus from the dead. We can believe in Jesus' words in verse 25 and 26 because we see that they are true in what he does. Verse 38, Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he says. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odour, for he has been there for 4 days. It's remarkable that he asked for the stone to be removed. And if he wasn't doing that because he's going to raise Lazarus from the dead, it would be just causing a real stench to come out. A very unpleasant time for grieving people. They're grieving the loss of Lazarus, and now he has to open the tomb and the odour will come out. Be like me coming here this morning having worn socks for about 4 days. And you wouldn't want me to take my shoes off then to have a sniff. Even worse is this odour coming from a dead man. But Jesus knew what he was doing. We've seen that from the beginning he knew what was going to happen, and he still does. So verse 40, then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and he prays, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. If you or I to stand by someone's graveside and call out in a loud voice to them to come out, we would look crazy. But Jesus, the Son of God, the resurrection and the life, stands there and says, Lazarus, come out. And this is what happens, verse 44, the dead man came out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. That is truly remarkable. Jesus has done what nobody can do. And he has raised a dead man. The dead man walks. He is alive again. Jesus is indeed who he says he is. He is the resurrection and the life. And he has shown that in the most dramatic way as he's taken the stone away and he's called out to the dead man to come out. We may have wonderful medical technology, defibrillators and other things that can get people's hearts going again. We may be able to take tablets or eat the right foods and live longer lives. But none of us can really stop death from coming. Only Jesus can provide us with resurrection and life that lasts beyond death. But you know what? He went even further than this. Because he, God himself, Jesus, he dies on the cross. He himself